Back in 2017, Ubisoft, a company most well known at the time for abandoning their vast catalogue of IPs to pump out yearly Assassin's Creed games, made a change to their most iconic franchise that's gone on to garner perhaps the most controversial reaction a gaming franchise has seen over the last decade. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's rewind 10 years earlier to 2007. Where Ubisoft are standing not as a figurehead of repetition, but as pariahs of innovation in the industry, with their release of both Assassin's Creed and its sequel trilogy, which were games that would near enough define a console generation. 4 excellent open-world action-adventure narrative-driven games that set the foundation for the following decade of industry trends. These games had massive yet detailed, intricate open worlds that were interweaved with concise, well-planned stories, which made for a combination that was rarely seen in the industry at the time, and this was made doubly for some of the game's specific features, such as eco-vision, dynamic movement, and social stealth, which would go on to be copied by every single AAA franchise under the sun. At this time, Ubisoft stood hand in hand with Rockstar with their innovation of the industry, but as they moved to the mid-2010s, they diverged and began pumping out annual releases. And it was here that franchise fatigue began to settle in. That being said, up until 2013, they were still successful, with Assassin's Creed 3 being the worst game in the franchise to that point. Not exactly a terrible entry. However, it was when Ubisoft tried to release 2 games on the same day in 2014, each clearly not having enough love, care, or passion put into them to be ready for release. More specifically, Assassin's Creed Unity was a disaster on release, as it was entirely broken, and in an instant ruined the reputation of both the franchise and of the company. They had been financially successful with annual releases, but they had clearly pushed it too far. And after Assassin's Creed Syndicate completely flopped a year later, they took a step back and attempted a reboot of the series with a more RPG-centric gameplay formula akin to the gaming trends of the time, with The Witcher 3 and Horizon Zero Dawn. And it was here where the change was made, where Assassin's Creed lost its identity, when it sold its soul, and it began prioritizing the sale of microtransactions and DLC, the artificial lengthening of playtime, and of course, the elimination of the Assassin's Creed from Assassin's Creed. This teardown of the spirit of the franchise that began in 2017 reached a fever pitch after the release and subsequent destruction of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, a game which advertised itself as a revival of the franchise that in reality was nothing but an artificially bloated Viking simulator with some Darby McDevitt writing sprinkled on top. Valhalla prioritized the sale of microtransactions over immersion. It prioritized mythological elements over lore. It prioritized a Viking fantasy over an assassin one. And it chased after industry trends as opposed to creating them. And it was at this moment for many fans of the franchise that marked the end. But then...
What are you doing?
Don't think.
A return to roots. That's what Assassin's Creed Mirage promises to be, and based on the gameplay and story trailers we've seen, that's exactly what it is. A condensed, story-focused game set in a jam-packed city, centering around the philosophy and ethics of the Assassin Brotherhood before it was reformed. A game that is built upon investigation and assassination, upon stealth being a core pillar, upon being an assassin. You can debate whether Assassin's Creed Mirage is going to be a true AC game or whether it's going to lean enough into the roots of the franchise. You can debate whether it's going to feel and play like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, but you absolutely cannot debate that it is the first time in 8 years that the assassin fantasy has been prioritized in a game. 8 years. But let me be clear, because I have absolutely no intention of sucking Assassin's Creed Mirage off, and I have even less intention to make claims about a game that hasn't even released yet. I'm just here to talk about some recent news that we heard regarding Assassin's Creed. Because a credible source recently rumoured that Assassin's Creed codename Red, the game following Mirage set in feudal Japan, will be the last of the origins formula of pseudo-RPGs. After Ubisoft demolished the identity of the franchise and essentially stole the formula of The Witcher 3 and Horizon Zero Dawn back in 2017, they have finally decided that it's not worth it anymore. And of course, Assassin's Creed Codename Red has probably been in development for going on 4 years now, so it makes sense that they can't exactly just scrap it. But considering Mirage's direction as a return to roots, and the seeming revival of the Assassin's Creed community that's come from that, I'd be very surprised if this rumour was entirely false. Especially for another big reason. Because I am under no illusion that Ubisoft is making this change and getting rid of the RPG formula to maintain the creative integrity of the franchise. Of course, this is Ubisoft we're talking about, and as such, this move is undeniably motivated by money. To be specific, there's two big financial reasons why this would be a good decision for Ubisoft. Number one, there's been massive outcry from audiences for a return to series roots with smaller, condensed games. And number two, huge, expansive AAA games are simply becoming too expensive to make. Ubisoft has been a failing company for years at this point, consistently losing market share in spite of all-time high revenues from microtransactions, and a large reason for that is because games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla cost ridiculous amounts of money to make, especially in comparison to the closer to AA budgets their old titles would cost. So while a game like Odyssey sold the same number of copies as Assassin's Creed 2, it had estimated production costs of 125 million to AC2's 20 million. And no, inflation doesn't cover that. Like I said at the start of this video, Ubisoft abandoned all of its AA titles back in the early 2010s to focus on 3 specific AAA franchises. And each of those have gone on to completely fall from grace, which is a big reason why Ubisoft haven't released a major title since October 2021. I truly believe that Ubisoft, along with many other developers, are going to return to making smaller scale games. Because over the last few years, we've seen games with massive development cycles simply not make the returns they needed. God of War Ragnarok had a 4-year development cycle. So did Spider-Man 2. Red Dead Redemption 2 is the only game Rockstar have released in 10 years. And Assassin's Creed Valhalla cost an estimated $150 million. But to put it very simply, the gaming audience hasn't grown with these games. For the most part, the same demographic that played games in 2012 are still playing games now. The market has expanded, but a lot of that expansion has been into indie and AA titles, and especially into the PC market, a realm where single-player AAA titles aren't the dominant force. And so it looks like it's going to be time for companies to scale down, and we've already seen Ubisoft return to some of its old AA IPs, with the Sands of Time remake, the recently announced Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, and if the rumours of a Black Flag remake are also to be believed, it seems like the company want to increase their output while lowering their obscene production costs, by producing a wider array of shorter, more condensed, more focused games. And the way I see it, that is nothing but fantastic for the consumer. I grew up in an era where every single year there was 5 to 10 fantastic narrative focused games, even if they were smaller scale than they are today. And when studios don't have to pump in so much money towards their entries into their franchises, it means that there's less risk involved, and as such, they can innovate. Of course, Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla copied industry trends at the time, because it was the safe thing to do. Assassin's Creed Unity and Syndicate both took risks and they completely flopped. Now, there are other reasons that those games failed financially, but it's undoubtable that if they had been less ambitious, they probably would have been more financially successful. What I'm trying to say is that if studios are allowed to make smaller scale games, they're far more likely to go outside the box with their game design, with the stories they tell, with everything they do. And on top of that, they won't be as reliant on microtransactions to make their money back, meaning that they won't build their games around selling microtransactions as was done in Odyssey and Valhalla with the artificial lengthening of those respective games. Sure, the motives are absolutely not of pure heart. Ubisoft is not going to make this change out of some respect and integrity for their franchise. However, regardless of the purity of their motives, this will undoubtedly lean in the favour of a true revival of the spirit of Assassin's Creed, which built its identity on great stories, great characters, memorable set pieces, condensed experiences, and innovative worlds. Games that told unique, independent stories that each tied together in meaningful ways, something that I could easily see happening with the interconnected element of the AC Infinity hub system. Regardless of any hopes of purity and of authenticity, Ubisoft is still a faceless company that is driven solely by profit margins. And although this is a pessimistic view, a genuine return to the roots of Assassin's Creed and a dismantling of the bloated, unrelated RPGs we've seen in recent years, that seems to be the way that Ubisoft can widen those margins. Really, the only question I have now is whether this will result in genuinely great games or simple mirages that try to recapture a ghost of greatness. And I want to hear what you think about this. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you see the future of Assassin's Creed being a positive or a negative? Let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you enjoyed, it would really be appreciated if you could hit like, and if you're new here, make sure to subscribe with post notifications turned on. With all that being said, I've been Joe, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.